Trying to make more sense of your family business? Let's talk about it.
Another episode of Making Sense of Family Business. Today I'm going to be talking about family values, visions, goals, and most importantly, plans or lack of family plans. Why? Well, if you don't integrate family values and visions and goals and plans with individual values, visions and goals and plans, you will end up with tension and conflict. And if you don't have any plans at all, you'll end up with a lack of clarity, certainty and commitment, which will almost certainly lead to some form of conflict sooner if not later. One of the things we do know is that in tough times, and we're going through some interesting times now, the end of 2025, early 26, a lot of instability, cost of living crises, all sorts of things. Business uncertainty is leading classically to a lot of corporates fearful of shrinking market share, shrinking margins, reducing profits, poor quarterly returns, battening down the hatches and playing defensively not to lose. Now, a lot of studies by Bain, McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, various others, over many, many years have concluded that tough times, recessionary times, high cost of living times, retail stress times, are the times when family businesses thrive compared to their competitors because they're there for the long game. They double down on their client and customer relationships, and they don't run and hide and play defensive. They look for the opportunities that are available to them because the big guys have left the field. So I've had families say to me, every dollar of ours on marketing and promotion and development goes 10 times further in the tough times because we're not competing against the big dollars of the big corporates. So we make our big quantum leaps in the worst times. We're very much using our patient capital, our long-term goals. We are very much in favor of building, developing, expanding, strengthening during the tough times. We know when we come out the other end, we will be in a stronger position than we went in relative to our competitors. Better market share, stronger brand recognition, greater customer loyalty, a whole raft of different things. And so those family businesses have a plan, they know where they're going, and the point is they just stick to the plan when things get tough. Where the big guys tend to cut back on costs, they reduce marketing, they reduce staff training, they cut back on recruitment, they reduce product development and all those sorts of things. And they are going backwards relative to the family businesses that are just holding themselves steady. So what is a plan? A plan is, in business, two parts. The first part is the strategic side of it, which is the big picture directions. What are the long-term goals we're going to try and achieve? What sort of business are we? What style are we operating in? What are our major markets? All of those big picture aspirational goals. And then a business plan needs to come in behind it, which is basically reduce the strategy to things we can measure. So typically financial and numerical. And set milestones, set measurement criteria. We can then create budgets, we can then manage the business very carefully, and we can also do the third level of activity, which is create an action plan, which says these are the things we physically need to do, and this is when we need to do it, and this is who is going to do it. So we're going essentially from the big picture intellectual strategy to the measurable corporate managed financial business plans, budgets, cash flows, forecasts, etc., to the actual action plans. Individual people can do this, that, and these times. When you've got that in place, it is an antidote to uncertainty. And uncertainty is what creates fear and suspicion and ultimately leads to conflict if people are suspicious and concerned about where they sit relative to other people. Good plans give clarity, certainty and commitment, and they therefore increase morale in the workplace and create better performance overall. I think of it as an ABCD thing, where you've got A, agree what your goals are, B, build a plan, C, commit to doing it, and then D, do the doing. And if you're doing that, fundamentally you're in a pretty good place. Now that would work in a business. We're talking here about a family. The idea of a family plan is not all about birth control. It's about actually knowing where the family is going, usually over a long time frame. So I usually talk to families about 25 to 100 years. You then get people turning around saying, well, I'm not going to be worried about much of that because I ain't going to be here. And then we say, well, let's visualize. You're up there sitting outside the pearly gates, hopefully, and you're looking down at the legacy, what you've left behind you, how your family, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids have built on the legacy that you have either bequeathed to them or received yourself and passed on to them as a good steward. And what would you want to see for them? Because we can build that into a family plan, and provided we make it realistic, that will be a light in the darkness for the family to follow. They don't have to make it up all the time because, just like the business, they are working to a plan, they've got clarity, they've got certainty, they've got commitment. It's not a business plan with monthly targets and things like that. It is much more, these are the things we're going to do over this time. We're going to put in education for our kids, we're going to put in investment projects, we're going to do these things for the community, we're going to do these things to protect our wealth in the family, arrangements for couples, married couples and things of that sort, and we are going to preserve our legacy for the future. You can't do that without a plan. You can't do it by tying up assets with protective trusts. You've got to be on the front foot to make things work, a little bit like the businesses that refuse to be suppressed by the bad times. Now, having a plan is all well and good because it captures the intention. That's what we're going to do, this is when we're going to do it, how we're going to do it, and so on. But there is a big gap between having a plan on paper, having great ideas in your head, and actually getting it done. One of the things I've learned, and I must admit I'm embarrassed it took me so long to learn it, is that there is a step between motivation, having the intent to do something, and implementation, doing the doing. And that can be described as activation. Activation is taking the intent and deciding what relatively simple, small task can be undertaken to get the ball rolling. Because if we look to go from intent to full-on implementation, very, very often we find that people just balk. They put it to one side to come back and it never happens. But if you pick a smaller task that is achievable and just get some momentum built, there is a much higher likelihood of success in getting the entire plan implemented. So I just raise that because it flows into something that I believe should be included in the policies of all family businesses, in the family and in the business. Because it's a core piece of the discipline which should form part of the culture of the organisation and the family. And that is, if you've got the motivate, activate, implement, you follow that with execute or execute. Sounds a bit harsh, but there you go. You link that with the three strikes and you're out rule. And it simply says, if in the planning we allocate a responsibility to an individual and they are reasonably equipped and reasonably willing to get on with the job, they have a crack at it and they fail, we can accept, assuming it wasn't mission critical, we can accept that sometimes things don't work, so we should sit down, joint problem solve, help to set them up, give them extra resources if they need, some learning, some encouragement, whatever it takes, give them a second go at it. You would like to think that most people won't give up after one attempt, So they have a second go. Now, if they fail at the second attempt, we are looking at this far more seriously as, do they not have the resources? Do they not have the time? Do they not have the ability? Do they not have the commitment? What is it that is stopping this from happening? Or is it, we bit off more than we could chew, it was just never going to happen? That, of course, takes us into a different place. But if the individual says, no, I'm going to keep going with this, I own this job and I'm going to make it happen, you give them a third chance. And you really, really work with them to make sure they've got every prospect of success the third time around. Because if they fail the third time, you've got some serious thinking to do about, was this a failure to prioritise appropriately? Was this ego over common sense? Was this person simply not as capable as we thought they were? Were they unable to get themselves organised? Are they therefore in a position they're not actually fit for? And most importantly, if they fail a third time, we're not going to give them a fourth chance. If the job needed doing, we're never going to give someone more than 3 cracks at it. We're going to take it off them and give it to somebody else. Now, if that's a family member, that can be a painful and embarrassing exercise. If it's a staff member, it will probably mean someone's going to have a serious look at what their role and seniority is in the business and what responsibilities they have to discharge and whether they're really up to it. So we're in serious territory, but if you have that as a firm policy, and everyone knows it's a firm policy, it becomes one of those absolute litmus tests of competence and culture in the business, which is really so important. Okay, so family plan, what do you do? My recommendation is a workshop. I use a questionnaire which I'll send around in advance. I'll get people to use it, not to submit, but to simply get their heads in the zone of the forms of questions we need them to be talking about and sharing, thinking through, sharing, negotiating in the workshop. So at the end, we come out with a plan which encapsulates personal values, visions, goals, etc. And it integrates them with the family's collective values, visions, goals. So we've renegotiated or we've negotiated and reconciled any clashes in values and visions. We've worked out how do we get the personal to work in with the collective. So they're not in clash, they're not in hiding, they're actually complementing each other. We get a lot of ventilation of where are people in their lives. How do they feel about themselves? How do they feel about the family? How do they feel about the family business? Where are their problems? Do they need to be sorted out before we go any further? What are their long-term intentions? Are they what the family expected? Or sometimes, more often than you'd expect, we discover in a family planning meeting that individual family members actually do not share the family's plan. I've had a number of situations where somebody who's been nominated as the CEO of the business, the person to take over the mantle when mum or dad steps down, at one of these meetings said, you know what, in the preparation, I've been talking with my partner and we want to spend a couple of years travelling. We've worked here all our lives, and before we have kids or before we settle down or with our kids, we actually want to take some time out. And the family then has a decision to make. Well, maybe dad's retirement has to be put back a couple of years. Do we support you for doing that? Do we say, well, if you're doing that, it basically destroys our whole plan and there's no coming back from it? Or do we say, great idea, do your travel, get that out of your system and learn, experience, enjoy, come back a better person, really ready to take up the reins? That comes down to the family's values. So that's why we do the values first, and then we go into the vision, and then we go into the plan. We need the personal stuff, and then we need to feed it into the family stuff, and then we need to wrap our arms around the whole thing and say, so we've got agreement on these things, and we can now boil it all down to an actual action plan with a timeline. The goals are clear, the timing's clear, the responsibilities are clear. We know exactly where this is going. And then my recommendation is at least once a year, well, generally once a year, the family gets together, it reviews the plan, same as in a business, you'd review the strategic plan and the business plan once a year, and you make sure you're still on track, and you record the fact. This is what we agreed to do, this is where we're up to, and here are our reports. If there's ever going to be a problem over probate and wills further down the track, if you've got a paper trail for years saying this is what the family always said it was going to do, that's what's in the will, that's what's in the letter of wishes, there's not much you can do to argue, no, that's not really what the family was doing, which is what often happens if you don't have a paper trail. And that's about it. So, family plan, you don't have a plan, that is probably the single largest cause of conflict I've come across in my practice, working with hundreds of family businesses for the last 3 decades or so. It's people not knowing what the plan is, what the role is, what their expectations are, what they can expect to get out of it. Therefore, they can't look a spouse in the eye and say, I'm doing this because they don't know what the end result is going to be. And vague promises from mum and dad, which may have been given many years ago, may have been given on a regular basis, may not be promises that are kept, unfortunately, and then you've got major problems. So do the planning, do the locking in, have a plan for the family as you would a plan for a good business, and check in on a regular basis the plan is still relevant and document the fact. That's my advice. If you found this useful, good. Please give us a like, please share it with other people who you think may find it useful, and come back next week for the next thrilling instalment. John Kemfield, Family Business Solutionist from Melbourne. Thanks for watching. Bye.